Alright YouTube, it's time for me to make a video specifically dedicated to the topic of my preliminary trajectory that I consider true in the presidential election. Now, Senate and House aside, I expect at this point the Democrats, regardless of whether Trump or Clinton wins, I believe they'll retake the Senate. Not so for the House. I see them continuing to be down a number of seats. It won't be as severe a gap. They'll make up lost ground, but they won't win the House back, I don't think, at this point. Again, regardless of what happens in the actual presidential tickets. I will say this, and I've been saying this almost since the primaries began, when it became clear that Trump was the main contender after Nevada, and I said he now has a good chance of winning the primaries. Paired with that was, if he does win the primaries, he has a good chance of winning the election. I put his odds at 90%. That being said, it's not certain, number one. It's largely unchanged throughout time for several months now, number two. When people say, oh, well, it sounds like you're less certain that Trump will win, there was never a certainty of Trump winning. High probability, yes. Certainty, no, absolutely not. I can't make a final prediction until at least a week before the election, roughly November 1st. That's when I'll begin to settle on what I think is actually going to happen. If you go into November with Trump down 10 points, he's not going to win. If you go in with a dead heat, I'd say, yeah, Trump has a damn good chance. I'd keep it at 90%. If Trump is ahead by a few more points, yeah, he wins the election, barring some massive thing happening towards the end. Now, look at what happened. The mainstream media right now is reviving old and almost certainly untrue allegations of sexual misconduct against Trump, because they appear to have expended their last bit of ammo with the tape that didn't hurt him enough, because he appears to have gone back up in the polls, almost to the level he was at before the tape was released, with his performance in the second debate. Therefore, in their minds, if he does well at the third debate, he takes the lead, he wins the election. They realize this, and they also realize that even if he does a half-assed job, WikiLeaks and O'Keefe and all these others will continue to pound Clinton, and it will severely limit her ability to make inroads. If that is the case, if the WikiLeaks leaks continue, for example, I see Trump winning, regardless of what else happens. Doesn't matter if the mainstream media piles on him, because let's face it, they have been for some time. It appears that even people who are Democrats who intend to vote for Hillary, a lot of them realize that these are speculative. They're not like the WikiLeaks leaks, where you've got Hillary herself at the second debate confirming that they're real and simply chalking it up to Russian espionage. It's a case where Trump has flat out denied it and doesn't have a problem with starting a lawsuit against the New York Times, which is a show of force. I don't see Hillary Clinton threatening to sue people who share the WikiLeaks files or something along those lines. We have a reason to believe there's a good chance that her 33,000 missing emails will be dropped in November. It's, so far, we're 2 for 2. WikiLeaks came through and is still coming through with the dumps. They're getting more damaging. They're probably going to keep getting more damaging. And we're on the beginning end of the leaks. So think about how bad they're going to get. If they're actually releasing them in batches and they've roughly organized them into clumps according to what is most damaging, with a few real gems in each batch, how many more batches they can release? There's like 10 more batches to release. That's a lot of leaks. That's a lot of scandal. Do you think they're going to get less damaging? No. Assange is gunning for Hillary Clinton because she wanted him killed. I don't blame him. It's very funny, by the way, to see Clinton's fans continue to parrot the tired old line of a Russian conspiracy. We even saw Hillary's advisor there, or whatever the hell she was, on her plane. Oh, we're not going to comment on these Russian hacks anymore. What proof do you have? Are you that nuts? Do you think people aren't going to notice the McCarthyist element within your party, apparently? People are. I haven't seen that many congressional Democrats, by the way, come out and try to defend her. That's going to become a problem, too, because they're going to start distancing themselves from Hillary. Even as the GOP establishment distances from Trump, the establishment Dems may very well have to do the same from Clinton just to maintain their jobs. I don't think that many of them want her endorsement right now, let's just put it that way. I don't think they're asking her to luncheons and brunches at the moment. But if these leaks continue, Even if they didn't get worse, even if it's just the little scandals that we've been getting, and I say little in a relative sense because they are quite significant. Even if it is more of the, well, Clinton's campaign manager rants about Catholicism and tried to infiltrate the U.S. Catholic body. Clinton's campaign manager refers to needy Latinos. Chelsea Clinton's a spoiled brat almost drove one of her staffers to suicide. Even if it's stuff like that, I would still predict that it'll take such a toll on her, day after day after day being reported on, that it'll hammer her. Now, WikiLeaks is smart. I think they probably wanted to release just the most damaging bits in a couple of batches, which would be more sensible in the average cycle, if you wanted to do maximum damage. But they went through those emails and realized Clinton had most of the mainstream media swinging for her, which means they're not going to report on many of these things. So what's the alternative? The alternative is a sheer flood, day after day, hour after hour, of nonstop leaks and scandals. Because in that way, you continue at a lower level to captivate the mainstream media, which can't help but at least mention these things on page 2. Otherwise, it becomes too conspicuous. Number 2, it starts organic movements, because Trump does have tens of millions of organic, actual living, breathing fans, which are more tech literate than those Hillary has. He doesn't have to pay people to post things on the internet. And it basically floods Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and all the other social media sites. That in turn refeeds back into the media, enters into the underground, the sort of the secondary media, the non-legacy, internet-only style media. To the point at which even now the Young Turks have broken down and appear not to really care about what happens to Clinton. That's a pretty good bellwether for what's happening to her campaign. While the story in the mainstream media is that Trump can no longer win and Hillary's riding high and the whole country's going to settle for Hillary, you see a different story everywhere else. Outside of the Clinton-controlled elements of the legacy media that have decreasing power over time. Outside of there, it's a free-for-all in favor of Trump. Drudge is having a great time. Matt Drudge right now is probably beating off on an hourly basis just reading these emails. Breitbart's happy. Cernovich is happy. Everybody else is happy. I'm happy. Look at all the people subscribing to this channel. Tens of thousands of people are tuning in. All I'm doing here is ranting about the daily Clinton conspiracy, the daily Clinton scandal, because it is now a daily thing. I didn't expect, by the way, that it would. My understanding of the WikiLeaks stuff, my understanding of O'Keefe was that he had one tape. My understanding of WikiLeaks is that they had like 3 batches to release. They were going to do a weekly thing. Instead, they've been releasing this stuff daily. O'Keefe has already released several smaller videos. He now proclaims he has several more, and then he has the big one. We have others claiming they have the 33,000 deleted emails. The situation for Hillary that I already saw as dire, and I based my preliminary trajectory of the race upon that, has gotten far more dire. It's gotten an order of magnitude worse for Hillary Clinton. The only reason that I'm not increasing Trump's odds beyond 90% chance of winning right now is specifically because it's not clear which side has more weight yet. It's not clear whether in the minds of especially some of the older voters that don't necessarily pay as much attention in many cases. I realize this isn't always the case. There are baby boomers. There are people who are in their 80s who use Twitter. I understand that. But generally, as a proportion, the younger generations are more keyed into social media. The Gen Xers and the Millennials and like Generation Y. Those are the people primarily using the internet for their news. The Boomers, it's, either or. And then for the older generations, it's largely still TV-based. Largely. A massive proportion. It's not clear yet whether social media or the legacy media is going to change more minds. If somebody pays primarily attention to the legacy media, what they're seeing right now in the news is that Trump is a depraved pervert, Hillary Clinton has not had a scandal in a while, is doing fine, and has a 99% chance of victory. That's what they see. If they're paying attention to the media on social media, that is the smaller media sites, the internet-based media firms, independent makers of information, whether on YouTube or wherever they happen to be, they're getting a completely different story. They're getting the story that the majority of Americans see Hillary Clinton as at least out of touch and boring, whether they intend to vote for her or not, and at worst, the most corrupt person to run for that office in the history of our country. They see Trump as an angel by comparison. Because the reality is that for Trump, all we have are allegations, many of which are decades old. Their magic bullet, their October surprise turned out to be a tape where he's never even, to be a tape from over a decade ago in which he makes questionable comments. That's a great October surprise. You see, the problem is his opponent has a dozen October surprises already, and there's plenty more coming. Probably have about 50 of them by the time October's over. Can her campaign, regardless of its collusion with the legacy media, weather that many scandals? I say probably not. I give a 90% chance that it can't. That it slowly declines or back down. I also see Scott Adams predicted this. I think he's right. That Trump would have one more collapse and then he'd be peaking right before the election. And lo and behold, if you look at the RCP trend line of the polling, Donald Trump has repeatedly had this happen to him. Hillary Clinton's support has basically not moved along its long-term trend line. In fact, if you create a best fit line, it's declined slightly over time since the general began into the primaries. Trump's has risen dramatically. If he is peaking in November, and she is in a stable zone or a trough, she will lose the election. What people don't realize is that there are still many tens of millions of people who intend to vote who haven't made up their minds. If they pay attention to social media, and undecideds tend to be quite young, which means most of them are, what they're seeing right now is a continuous tidal wave of Hillary scandals, with the media, now known to be in direct collusion with her campaign, reporting instead on decades-old so-called scandals that were never corroborated. They never went to court for a reason. They weren't even settled. They never had legs to begin with. So which one do you think is more damaging to a campaign? Does anybody here, anybody, you can weigh in on this. Comment if you do. Do you take CNN seriously? Do you trust them? Do you trust Fox or MSNBC or any of these other groups? I'm betting for a large proportion of you, the answer is no. Most of you may not even watch them. You may not pay any attention to them. If you do, there's a good chance you don't trust them at all. So, which one has more leverage? Well, that remains to be seen. My bets are on social media, where the future for Miss Clinton is not quite as rosy as what you'd get, reading the USA Today or the Atlantic, certainly, or watching Anderson Cooper or anything like that. I don't think it's quite so rosy. I think that it smacks of yellow journalism, what they're doing, and people are beginning to understand what's truly going on. Don't underestimate the Americans' people's ability to wake up and actually smell the roses and see the world around them as it really is for a change. They've been lulled into a lot of falsehoods over time. But I still think that there are plenty of people who can potentially wake up before November. They'll see what's happening. It is collusion. It's totally dishonest. Clinton is corrupt. They will not vote for her, and that will end her campaign. That's my preliminary prediction. But again, I won't make a final prediction until at least the 1st of November. And it might not even be that early. I might have to wait until 4 or 5 days before the voting takes place, maybe the 3rd or the 4th of November, before I give my final prediction of what will happen. And even then, I could be wrong just because there's like last-minute poll movement, but I promise I won't wait until the night of the actual election. And by the way, obviously, there will be a stream on the night of the election. Whether I'm right or wrong, at this point, to me, it doesn't really affect me. If Clinton's elected, all it means is I'll have quite a bit to complain about for months and months, driving more viewership. So it indirectly benefits me if she's elected. If Trump's elected, I think the economy will improve. People will probably have more money to spend, which means potentially on my books. That helps me too. I can't lose. I prefer Trump. I think Clinton's corrupt as all get out. But will the sky fall if she was elected? I don't think so. We survived 2 terms of Obama. Ultimately, it'd be 4 more years of crap. I might start a nuclear war. Other than that, yeah, it's probably going to be basically like, lame duck Obama. She probably won't have the House to work with her anyway, so there's not a whole lot she can do other than put in a Supreme Court justice or 2, which, it's not great, but it's better than if she had the House on her side, I suppose. But I still do not expect Clinton to win. I expect Trump to be the winner. I've been right on almost everything in the election so far. People seem to think that because he stalls out temporarily in polling, that he's somehow doomed. That's not the way that things work, my friends. That's just not how polling works. It's an inexact science that fluctuates wildly over time, as we've seen a dozen times already before in the election. That's about all. Peace out.